Good morning, personal finance. Just going to review a little of the Q&A 326. The highlight being investing versus saving. And some folks, you hear the word investing, you hear the word saving. Though they have some common ground, and yet they're very different. Saving is when you put money aside, kind of set it aside. You have to have income, first of all, and you take some of that income and you set it aside, and that would be considered your saving. Money that you're not spending immediately, you're setting aside for the future. Well, what makes that different than investing? Well, investing is taking that money and utilizing it to try to make that money grow, and that's the essential difference. Now, when you put money into a savings account in a bank, you do have some small semblance of interest. You get some little gain on your money by putting in a savings account or in a certificate of deposit. And some might say, well, you're saving, and you're putting your money somewhere where you're going to get money. You're going to earn money on your money, and that's what investing is all about. Having your money work for you. The first quote that we had last night there was, the wealthy think of money as a 24/7 employee, somebody that's always working for you. Make your money work for you. And most of us do that, some more so than others. And that all depends on your personality and your philosophy in life and your strategy and your goals with regard to your finances. So it's all going to depend on that in terms of how you invest your money. But saving it is just to set aside some money, while investing it is to take that money that you set aside, and rather than just let it sit under your mattress, you're going to take it and put it somewhere where you're going to gain some money. Somebody's going to pay you for it, for you giving them their money. And so that would be considered investing. A couple of different terms that you have to, we've talked about interest and principal, right? Interest and principal already. That came up, and that came up in the borrowing section when we were borrowing money. The amount of money you actually borrowed is the principal. Then you earned interest on it, or paid interest on it. Well, here we're just flipping it around, and now as the saver or investor, you're the one gaining the interest. You're the one taking the principal and putting it somewhere, and you're gonna get the interest. You're not going to pay the interest. So we've flipped it around in this section. So the money you set aside, the money you put somewhere, whether it's the $10,000 in a certificate of deposit in a bank, or you buy stocks, or you put money toward real estate and the various investments that we're going to talk about over the next few days, you're looking to gain some rate of return. And so when we talk about investing, the word interest comes up. I just wanted to compare it to the way we used it before. But in general, what we're looking for is a rate of return. What do you get on your money when you invest it somewhere? That's the rate of return. And the word rate implies, right, rate, percentage, just like interest rate, the rate of return that you gain. Okay? So that phrase has come up. Now, the other item off of the Q&A, one of the other items, was we had seen APR already. Remember APR? Again, this was really in the borrowing unit, and now you're going to see APY, because now we're earning the interest. And the difference, if you recall, this was annual percentage rate. That's the interest rate that was charged based on an annual number, Remember, we said we do that normally when interest rates are quoted. It's quoted annually. So if you hear something 7%, that means it's paid 7% annually. Or if it's 6%, it's 6% annually, which means that's half of a percent monthly if you wanted to look at it that way. Okay, so that's the annual percentage rate. So when we went to borrow money, that's what we were faced with. Well, what's the difference here? Uh, Now you'll see when you look this up, annual percentage, same meaning for the first two letters, but the Y stands for yield, and yield uh, gets back to that phrase of rate of return. What kind of rate of return will you get? What type of yield will you receive on your investment? So these are closely related terms, yet on opposite sides of the game. This is you tend to see when you see in a bank that you're going to borrow money. You know, what is the mortgage rate? You'll see it quoted APR, 3.9%. If you see advertised somewhere or you see in a bank's literature, any money where it's APY, that's from the side where they're going to be paying you. That's what's going to be your rate of return, depending upon the product that's being offered by the bank. Okay? And the other item was the various types of products. I think we really broke it down, you know, and here's the word savings again, but the savings account. When you go to a bank, you can open up a savings account. I wouldn't doubt many of you already have a savings account already open. And you might say, well, is this savings or investing? Well, in a technical sense, it's investing because they are going to there's going to be an APY, an annual percentage yield for you, usually in most savings accounts. It happens to be extremely low in a savings account, in particular in recent months or years, but the savings rate is very, very low. But folks like to put their money somewhere rather than leave it in a shoebox in their house. They'll open up a savings account and put money into a savings account and receive an interest rate, a yield on that, an annual percentage yield on that, small. Then the other we talked about yesterday, the checking account, to look up a checking account. It seems to have a lot of the same features as a savings account. Some checking accounts offer interest rate on it, but the checking account is generally folks will use that to put their money, to park it. So again, it's not in a shoebox in their house, but it's probably going to be used quickly. It's a place to store the money, a place where you can put your savings, a place to hold it. But many times in checking accounts, people are paying their bills with that checking account. Today, with debit cards are linked to checking accounts, so that money that's earned in many cases now, the money that you earn at a job is directly deposited into a checking account. More folks than not have it deposited into a checking account. And then once it's in that checking account, now you make your move. You might write a check or two, and those days are coming to a close. In terms of writing out an actual check, we're going to talk about how to write that out. But most folks link a debit card to that checking account. Some folks link other kinds of accounts, their public service electric and gas account to that, or other kinds of bills that they have to pay over the course of the year that they may pay by online or by phone. They'll link it to a particular checking account. So a lot of folks have both operating at the same time. The savings account, the checking account. A lot of similarities. The other we had down there was a certificate of deposit, and we are going to get into a couple different kinds of products that financial institutions will offer. A certificate of deposit, a CD. And CD is another place to put your money in a financial institution, in a bank, certificate of deposit. What would make that different than a savings account? Well, certificates of deposit tend to pay a higher rate of interest. The APY is generally greater on a certificate of deposit. Now, why would that be the case? Well, you pretty much have access to your savings account money almost at any time. And to start a savings account doesn't take an awful lot. You just need a few bucks and you can put it into a savings account. A certificate of deposit will require usually a minimum deposit. And minimum deposits, and it will depend, it can vary. It could be $100, very commonly $500 certificate of deposit. And as the minimum deposit grows, you'll receive a higher interest rate. You get a higher annual percentage yield, the greater the deposit that the bank might require for the certificate. Some go into the thousands, well into the thousands. Minimum deposit, $25,000. So now, what's bad about what are some of the other constraints? There's usually a time constraint. Certificate of deposit might be a 1-year certificate of deposit or a 5-year certificate of deposit. If you see that, what they're trying to do is say you're making a more or less an agreement that you're not going to touch that money for that particular time period. Now, the truth is you'll have access to that money. You'll be able to have access to a certificate of deposit, but there may be some early withdrawal penalty, loss of some interest. So there's going to be some penalty attached to it on a certificate of deposit. So there's your difference between your savings and your certificate of deposit. Neither one you're really looking to tap into right away. But the savings account you have access to on a day-to-day basis, while the certificate of deposit, the concept is that you put your money there, usually a minimum deposit, so it's not necessarily a small amount of money, but you put your money into a certificate of deposit, which is sizable enough, and you can kind of agree with the financial institution that you're not going to touch it for a period of time. And for that commitment, the financial institution usually gives you a higher rate of return, higher interest rate. So that's the beginning, just a little review over some of the concepts we talked about yesterday. And we're going to get a little more into investing and some of the technicalities of investing over the next few classes. Okay, thank you, Personal Finance.